Let's start with Wednesday here at the DNC, where the theme was a fight for our freedoms. Now, I want to read how actually ABC News described this. So interesting. This is a quote from the article. The word freedom is seemingly on the lips of every attendee and speaker, and the name of Beyoncé's hit song and now campaign anthem. Audience chants of USA puncture speakers' remarks as they wave signs saying the same. Camo hats bearing the names of Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz pockmark the crowd. And musician Jason Isbell performed the country hit song, Something More Than Free. The convention marks a culmination, ABC continues, of decades of Democratic efforts to take back patriotism after years of Republicans owning messaging around freedom and the American flag. Let's take a listen to how Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, huge swing state, framed the theme of freedom.
We are the party of real freedom. That's right. The kind of real freedom that comes when that child has a great public school with an awesome teacher because we believe in her future. Real freedom that comes when we invest in the police and in the community so that child can walk to and from school and get home safely to her mama. Real freedom that comes when she can join a union, marry who she loves, start a family on her own terms, breathe clean air, drink pure water, worship how she wants, and live a life of purpose where she is respected for who she is. Real freedom that comes when she can look at Madam President and know that this is a nation where anything and everything is possible. That is real freedom, and that is what we are fighting for.
Now, we have seen previews of the strategy from Democrats just over the last couple of days here in Chicago. We've heard them kind of teasing that theme, teasing that they are the actual party of freedom, and to hear Governor Josh Shapiro come out and say that so explicitly was really, really interesting. Freedom is sort of the ultimate political football in American politics. It usually means absolutely nothing, no matter which party is using it. But Democrats right now are making a concerted effort to lean into owning freedom. There's no question about it. And that's pretty interesting. I mean, I could, as a conservative, go on about how Tim Walz's COVID policies are laughable from the party of freedom, not just Tim Walz, the Biden-Harris administration's speech policies when it came to COVID, when it came to other major questions on American politics. Democrats now feel like, because of Project 2025, which was a huge, huge character throughout the DNC, but definitely here today on Freedom Night, SNL, Saturday Night Live, cast member Kenan Thompson mentioned it, which is sort of crazy to hear Kenan Thompson walking out with this giant Project 2025 book and talking about how Project 2025 wants to strip freedoms from people, for example, same-sex married couples. He talked to one woman about the prices of her insulin. So it was all over the place, Project 2025. The connective tissue between Project 2025 and freedom, I think, actually tells us a lot about the Harris campaign strategy over the next couple of months. They want to say that there is a serious threat that Donald Trump is going to rip away freedoms, that he is going to go back, that we are going to go back. That's another line you're hearing a lot here at the DNC. And that's how Josh Shapiro handled it. I want to mention, before getting to Oprah, and of course, Tim Walz, this moment in Bill Clinton's speech, he actually made a joke about his age. He said he was still younger than Donald Trump, even though he's a very old man. He gave a 30-minute speech. I don't know that I've seen Bill Clinton look physically this weak. It's something I felt about Joe Biden the other day. In fact, it was looking as feeble as he has ever looked. Bill Clinton also looked fairly feeble. He's not as sharp as he once was. That was as acute as I've seen it in Bill Clinton's performances. But Bill Clinton compared Joe Biden to George Washington. Let's take a listen.
He voluntarily gave up political power. And George Washington knew that, and he did it. And he set the standard for us serving 2 terms before it was mandatory. It helped his legacy, and it will enhance Joe Biden's legacy.
All right, so that's the line. Bill Clinton says that Joe Biden is Washington-esque, that he has done the rarest thing, which is willingly give up his power. Now, of course, he wasn't so willing. He said for a long time it would take an act of God to get him to drop out of the presidential ticket. And, maybe that was true if your act of God was Machiavellian maneuvering from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita, I think is what they call her. To say it was willing and Washington-esque, to compare Biden to that is, I suppose, smart politically, but a real insult to Washington's memory, because George Washington didn't literally claw his hands into the Resolute desk and get dragged away by Nancy Pelosi and other party leaders who were worried about, frankly, power and money and, well, Donald Trump. To put it charitably, they're worried about the ideological threats posed by Donald Trump. To put it maybe a little bit differently, there are certainly a lot of people worried about their access to power and their bottom lines if Trump gets into office again. That happens on both sides of the aisle, of course, but the stakes were really high for a lot of people, and that's suddenly when you saw Biden melt down on the debate stage, when those claws started to dig into the desk, and the movement to pull him away from that desk really started in earnest. So not exactly a willful move on behalf of, or a willing move on behalf of Joe Biden, but just continuing the theme, Oprah came out. Oprah came out looking amazing, getting an electric response from the crowd because, of course, she referred to herself as an independent, which I thought was sort of interesting because I just have a hard time imagining Oprah having voted for any Republican, like actually voted or supported any Republican meaningfully in the last couple of decades, but she self-identifies as an independent. She came out and gave a rousing speech on behalf of Kamala Harris. But one of the things I thought was interesting about Oprah, similar to what Bill Clinton did, similar to what Josh Shapiro did, it was, I would say, definitively patriotic. I would characterize the speech that Oprah gave as first and foremost patriotic.
Let us choose. Let us choose truth. Let us choose honor. And let us choose joy. Because that's the best of America.
Okay, so she kept insisting that Kamala Harris is the best of America. That what the Democratic Party is offering right now is the best of America. I'm saying this as somebody on the right. I'm saying this as a conservative. I am always happy. Maybe you'll tell me that my standards are too low, but in a weird way, I think it is always a net benefit when people on the left say positive things about America and say positive things about the country that they live in, that if you're somebody like Oprah, a country that gave you so much and arguably more than any other country could have in the course of like human history. So I think it would be a huge criticism from the right of Oprah if she hadn't said anything positive about the country. And throughout the course of the Trump years, there has just been so much constant negativity from Democrats about America, getting to the point where, 1619 Project basically positing that the country was founded to preserve slavery. The Revolutionary War was all about slavery. It basically had to retract that point. But it was just we were all drowning in this negativity about America. And Republicans don't usually go down that route. Donald Trump famously gave the speech of American Carnage, where he described what had happened in the United States as American Carnage in his inaugural address back in early 2017. So that was obviously a fairly negative rendering of life in the United States of America in the year 2017. But even Trump, is usually much more positive about the United States, from Trump to other Republicans. As that ABC News piece put it earlier, it's something that freedom is something Republicans have owned. Patriotism is something that Republicans have owned for a really long time. And it's just, I think, a net benefit when we can all kind of find that point of consensus, even if we don't realize we're finding a point of consensus, and that point of consensus being like we actually like the place that we live and we think that it is fully redeemable, has qualities that make us happy to see the, quote, best of America, as Oprah said. I don't mean to be gushing too much over the Democrats here. I think it was incredibly, I don't want to say hypocritical, but noteworthy that J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, was bragging about how he was a real billionaire right after Bernie Sanders was condemning billionaires and income inequality. J.B. Pritzker came up literally moments later to talk about how he was a real billionaire compared with Donald Trump. There's just a lot of, I think, faux populism coming from Democrats here. I was at a party, obviously for work and reporting journalistic purposes, the other night, and it was filled with, establishment sort of Democrats, people who would probably embrace a lot of populist economics. In fact, at one point there was a portrait of Cori Bush along with other people being projected onto the wall. They're kind of individually going down the line, and Cori Bush was up there. And again, on that same projector slide, Cori Bush is a member of the squad who just lost her primary re-election bid, basically somebody aligned with democratic socialism. And on the next slide, it was like advertising how the event had been put up by FedEx and Salesforce and the Motion Picture Association of America and, Squire Patton Boggs and all of these, very sort of fancy organizations, major corporations, the law firms that represent major corporations. So it's faux populism. There's no question about it. In many cases, the DNC is best described compared to the RNC. The RNC feels like a political event. It feels like when you go to a political conference. The DNC feels like an entertainment event. It feels like when you go to, LA and you're walking, through some super fancy, I don't know if I've ever been to a fancy party in LA, so I shouldn't say, but when you're going to like an entertainment industry event, that's more what the DNC feels like compared to the RNC. The RNC had like Amber Rose, a legitimate celebrity who was getting swarmed every time she sort of popped her head out of something, because she was basically the only legitimate celebrity who wasn't a member of the Trump family. Here, every time you turn your head, you look at Don Cheadle, you look at Julie Louis-Dreyfus, you look at, this morning I was in a hotel lobby next to Busy Phillips. There's just, this place is crawling with real, actual, famous, well-liked celebrities. And so I think that also presents a challenge for Democrats. I'm going to talk about this in a bit. It kind of creates a catch-22. You want to be the party of Tim Walz and his hunting, but then you're also the party of Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff, people with deep, deep ties to Hollywood. Now, speaking of Tim Walz, let's play this very last clip. This is one that is, I've seen this making the rounds basically more than any other excerpt from Tim Walz's speech, which is interesting. I think it was 18 minutes long. Pete Buttigieg spoke for 8 minutes, gave a pretty well-received speech. And then Tim Walz came out later in the night. He ended the night with this about 20-minute speech, a little under 20-minute speech, and at one point shouted at his kids. Cameras go to his kids. Let's take a look at what those cameras caught.
And I love you. I'm letting you in on how we started a family.
So that's just an incredible moment. You don't have to be left or right to be moved by that moment where Tim Walz's nonverbal son is mouthing, "That's my dad." It's pretty easy to understand why this is going viral. His daughter, Tim Walz's daughter Hope, that's his son Gus, and his daughter Hope. His wife is tearing up. His daughter does the heart sign. His son could not possibly be more proud of his dad. I know that I've talked about this on this show before. There are a few people in politics right now who I find to be as objectionable as Tim Walz. I think he's actually an incredibly talented politician. I think he's, let's say, I don't know, kind of a phony. And I've talked about that on the show before, so you can go look up those clips. But you got to hand it to Tim Walz. Obviously, he's a great dad to his kids, and they love the guy. And, to be cynical and to put it politically, that plays well. If you're trying to, as the DNC is, boost the character of your vice presidential candidate who's supposed to appeal to regular Americans, you couldn't have choreographed it to look like that. I mean, that was genuine, authentic, and a really beautiful moment. So no surprise that it's going massively viral. It'll certainly help the public's perception of Tim Walz. And I guess the real positive thing to come out of that is the guy's a good dad to his kids. Positive politically, but also positive on the substance, which is that these two kids have a dad who loves them and who they love back. But if we're being cynical about politics, the DNC couldn't have choreographed that to go better for Tim Walz, who is actually, media's not being super focused on this, but Walz is facing a host of questions about his character. Did he fudge how he described whether or not his children were conceived via IVF? Did he fudge his military record? Did he fudge all kinds of different things about his personal background? These are fairly serious questions that Tim Walz is facing, even if the kind of legacy media isn't focused super heavily on it. These are clouds that are surrounding him. They are questions he'll get occasionally on the campaign trail between now and November. So to have this moment where his character is on display in a very positive way, an undeniably positive way, it's a good moment for Tim Walz. It's a good moment for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and a good moment for Democrats who had this step towards softening their image in the eyes of certainly many viewers. So that's what happened here in Chicago. Again, it's been really interesting here on the ground. I know I talked about this earlier in the week. The joy is real. And again, let me just say two things can be true. The joy can be real, and it can be a different and a lesser joy than 2008. These two things are not mutually exclusive. I think when a lot of people say this joy is real, it is sounding like, well, it's just 2008 all over again. That was what the Washington Post editorial, a Washington Post editorial suggested earlier this week. But these two things can be true. Can be really joyful and not 2008. My sense right now is that a lot of people are projecting their catharsis onto Kamala Harris. People I've talked to can't exactly explain why everyone flipped on Kamala Harris. She went from being the least popular vice president in modern history to suddenly being someone everyone here is excited about. It's showing up in polling too, specifically of Hispanic voters. They've become very favorable towards Kamala Harris in terms of enthusiasm. Axios reported on this just a couple of days ago that they had closed the enthusiasm gap with Hispanic voters. We'll see how that affects other voters' enthusiasm towards Kamala Harris, but the enthusiasm gap here between this and the RNC, it could have been dramatic. And instead, the RNC came after Donald Trump, who got shot in the head. Republicans were up against Biden, the guy who had just been shot in the head, and Joe Biden. And there was a real sense of gravity and weight. There was a lot of happiness. There was a lot of joy that Donald Trump had literally survived. But there was also a weight and a gravity at the RNC that isn't quite here because people are on a little bit of a sugar high. So that could create a little bit of a catch-22.